How's it going? Hope you guys enjoyed lunch. I'm Hector, and today I will be kicking off the Parse 101 track. There's a lot of content that we will be covering today, so if you have any questions, do know that we will have a 5 to 10 minute Q&A after each session. And if you still have any questions after that, feel free to grab any of us in the hallway during the day. So today, you will be learning about Parse's 6 core pillars. They are Parse Data, Social, Push, Crowd Code, Hosting, and Analytics. In this specific talk, I will provide an overview of Parse Data and Social. I will also show some quick examples of the rest of the pillars, but I invite you to check out our other talks during the rest of the day. And as a reminder, Parse is everywhere. We have native SDKs for all the platforms. Today, I will be using the iOS SDK for my examples. But note that most of the examples transfer just the same to the other platforms, so don't worry about that. So let's get right into it. Parse Data. The goal of most applications is to deliver useful information to their users, of course. This information is usually self-contained in the app binary itself. But it doesn't have to be this way. That makes for a static, boring app. And users today expect their apps to provide lively, up-to-date data at all times. A good example of this is our very own Parse Developer Day application. It's pretty straightforward. You can see a list of all the talks that will be going on today. And our goal is to help keep you up to date with all the sessions that will be going on. So if there were any schedule changes, it would be unfortunate if we had to wait for a new version of the app to be deployed. Since we're using Parse, we can update this information, and it will be available on your devices right away. So how do we actually store this information in Parse? Well, in this case, we are representing a very simple object. It's a talk with a title, a track, and a time. So let's create our first talk object and see some code. In Parse, we use PF objects to represent our data. A PF object, if you have worked with NS Dictionary before, is very similar. It's a map of keys and values. So let's create our first PF object and give it the class name talk. Then we can just go ahead and give it a title, a track, and a time. You can use strings, dates, even geopoints as the values of your keys. Then finally, to save this object onto Parse, it's just one line, saving background. It takes care of setting up that network connection to Parse. You don't have to do anything. So once that's done, you can now see that object in your data browser. You can see all the data we just saved, and there's also some new fields, such as the object ID. It's a unique ID that our servers will give to each new object, as well as some timestamps to help you keep track of when the object was created. So by the way, this is what the data browser looks like. It gives you an overview of all the data that you have saved in your app so far. It lets you inspect your classes, see which columns you have, and so on. You can even use this to input data into your app, so you don't have to create every talk using code. In this case, we just went ahead and created all the sessions in the data browser. That's great, but for your app, you will need some way to get this data programmatically so that it can be displayed. The way you do this with Parse is by using a query. If you have used databases before, you may be familiar with a SQL query. In this case, we use a parse query or PFQuery in iOS. over the class name talk. Since right now I just want to get all the objects in my talk table, I can just go right ahead and call find objects in background with block. It is an asynchronous operation. What this means is that your application's main UI thread won't be blocked while we wait for the data to be fetched from the network. This specific method takes a block. A block in iOS, it's a common structure that you can use with asynchronous methods. In this case, you will get an array of results from that query. If there were any errors when the query was being run, you'll get this from the error parameter. Now, if you want to get a specific type of talk object, this query can be expanded. Let's say that I just want to get those talks that are taking place in this track, in the Parse 101. And I also want to only get those talks that haven't happened yet. What I do is I use a where key equal to constraint over the track column, as well as a where key greater than constraint over the date column or the time column. And fetching these objects works the same way. Find objects in background. Now you have the specific talks that are going to happen in this room today. So now you need to display this data in your app. And we noticed that this is such a common pattern to want to display data from a query in your app. We noticed that everybody, basically, they want to display a table view or a list. So we thought, why don't we just make it built-in into a framework? So introducing PFQuery Tableview Controller. It is a subclass of UI Tableview Controller, so you already know how it works. It's very easy to set up. Just give it a class name, as well as the name of the column that you want to display for each row. It also comes with additional functionality. You can get pull to refresh, or you can use pagination to get through all your objects easily. That's the basic use for a PFQuery Tableview Controller. But since this is basically displaying the results of a query, if you need to expand it or show us a more specific set of data, you can always just return your own PFQuery here. So how do you set it up? Basically, you'll want to create a subclass of PFQuery Tableview Controller. And in your designated initializer, set up the class name, the name of that text key that we will use for that label in each row. And in this case, I'm also using an image key. This is used to display an image automatically for certain objects. In this case, the ice cream break. Now, since this is still a UI Tableview Controller, you can use the same methods you're used to customize it to your own needs, as we have done with the PDD application. That's great for storing simple data structures, such as a talk, but we actually need to have a more complex data structure. For example, we want to actually have a separate object, not for the track, but for the actual room where each session takes place in. So we can just go ahead and create a new room object. And when we create our talk, instead of a string, track 1, we just give it a pointer to that room. That works. We do the same for the speaker. That way we can get their profile picture, their name, their bio, and so on. But if you notice, this example I'm using, it's for the customer panel we had this morning. There's more than one speaker. So we just use an array of PF objects that is also supported when you're saving data in Parse. Now, there's many ways you can set up relational data in Parse. So I invite you to check out our upcoming talk on relationships later today in track 3. So parse social. Your app does not exist in a vacuum. You have users. Users have friends. They're eager to share your awesome new app with their friends. So how can Parse help you do that? Well, first, we have a special type of PF object that's designed specially for helping you set up user accounts. It has special fields that can be used for username and password. Usernames are automatically unique across the entire table. And not only can you use username and password to authenticate your users, you can let them log in with Facebook or Twitter. Or you can use any combination of these authentication methods. The way you do this in code, you can create a new PF user object, give it a username and a password, and remember that I said this is a PF object. You can set any type of custom arbitrary columns on this PF user object. In this case, I'm choosing my favorite color, which is Parse Blue. To sign up the user, again, it's just one line, and that's it. Now, to log in, to let your users log into your application, it's very similar. We provide a login method, give it the username and password. If the username and password are correct, you will get a user back. If they don't match, you'll get an error. You don't need to worry about persisting the user. There's no need to keep track of, did they log in? Should I show the login screen? What should I do? You can always refer to PF user, current user. And if the user is logged in, you'll get a reference there. So that's a lot of code to just get your users logged in into your application. And this is such a common pattern that it doesn't make sense to have you guys making this every time for every app. So of course, we have a built-in UI control. It's PF logging view controller. And it's set up so that you can just add this to your app. It will let you show a username and password login screen. It has a brother called PF signup view controller. You can use this to let your users sign up for a new account. And they are highly customizable. They can use the Facebook and Twitter login options pretty easily if you prefer that method. So let's see an example of how you can use Parse Data and social in your application. Well, for one, let's say that I want to get all the objects that were created by a specific user. Well, I can construct a query over a class name, and then when I'm setting up the constraint, I can say, I want the author of this object to be equal to the user that's currently logged in. So PF objects or PF users can be used as values in a query constraint. Another way that you can set up a similar query is by using access control list. This lets you set up very granular or broad, as however you need it, access controls over your data. So for example, if I want to make a post private across the entire application, you can just give it an ACL that just gives read and write access to the current user that is creating this object. This is actually applied or implemented at the database layer. So you can be sure that no one else is going to have access to that object. But maybe you want something that's more useful in a social application. You might want to have a public post where everybody can read this object, but only the owner or the user that created it should be able to edit or even delete that post. For that, we let you set public read access on the ACL on the object. And again, this is implemented at the database layer, and it works with queries. You don't need to, if you use this, You don't need to set up a constraint over user. You just query the talk table, for example, and only those objects you have read access to will be returned. So I talk about Facebook and Twitter login. If you actually use this, if you let your users link their user accounts to Facebook or Twitter, not only are you getting access to their identity and you can confirm that they are a real person, you can now make authenticated requests to each network as a user. This means that when someone signs up for your app, you can get their existing user profile from Facebook, for example. Or you can find their friends and import their social graph. You can use this to share content as a user on these networks. You can learn more about this in an upcoming session in track 3. So we've talked about keeping users engaged. How do you do this? Your app, you have to keep in mind that your app is going to be sharing a mobile device with many other applications. It's not going to be at the front of the device at all times. So you need a way to push new information to the user to keep them engaged with your application. You can do that using push notifications. One great thing about Parse is that it lets you use a single API to push to all the platforms that we support, which are, for push notifications, we support iOS, Android, Windows 8, and Windows Phone 8 right now. It's very easy to choose your audience. There's 2 ways to target a push notification. There's a basic subscription model where the devices actually subscribe to a channel. And you can just send a push to anybody who's listening to that channel. Or if you need more specific granular targeting of your push notifications, you can actually use those queries that we just saw to construct a specific query that says, hey, I want to push just to this specific subset of users. So it's pretty powerful. You will learn all about push in the talk after this one in this same room. If you need to actually keep track of your users and see if are they engaged, are they listening to your push notifications, are they actually using your app, we have a framework for that. Parse Analytics helps you track how many users launch your app in response to a specific push notification. Or if you're not using push notifications, you can just see how many users are even opening your app, how many times per day they're using your app. And as of today, we let you track custom analytics. This is great for analyzing user behavior. We will be describing in more detail how custom analytics works in our upcoming talk, where we will be drilling down into Parse Analytics. Everything I have covered so far deals a lot with client code. But there are some situations where you might want to offload some business logic into Parse's infrastructure. So for that, you can use Cloud Code. Cloud Code is basically JavaScript in the cloud. It has certain functionalities, such as allowing you to run custom code when objects are saved. You might want to use, for example, you can run code before an object is saved, and this is great for validating the data that is coming in. You can also run code after an object is saved successfully. I like using this to automatically send push notifications to my users whenever someone leaves a new comment on their blog post, for example, or on their photos. And as of today, we have introduced background jobs. These are long-running jobs that have no timeout, and they can be scheduled as many times as needed. Another thing that Cloud Code lets you do is integrate with third-party services. We have some built-in modules that you just drop into your Cloud Code that let you send text messages, emails, or even accept payments from your users. For those services that we don't provide modules yet, you can use HTTP requests to integrate with the RESTful API. We've also announced a new module today, the Parse Image module, that even lets you process images in the cloud. You can resize and crop those images. There's many talks that will be covering this today. We will have sorry about that, Cloudy with a bunch of code, our introduction to Cloud Code, as well as some partners that will be covering our built-in modules in the partner track. Now, we've covered many solutions that help you eliminate any need for servers. But there's one missing piece. You need a website for your application. And of course, it makes sense for Parse to provide you with a way of hosting your website on Parse. It's server-free. You get your own subdomain. Or if you have a domain name already, you can set up your custom domain to point to Parse hosting. Parse hosting provides static files, but you can also use the Express JavaScript framework to build a dynamic website. We have an example of a website that was built with Parse hosting, and you may have seen it already. It's the website for this very own conference. That's completely hosted on Parse hosting. For this and more advanced Cloud Code sessions, I invite you to check out Advanced Cloud Code in the Advanced track later this afternoon. So this was the brief overview of what Parse can do for you. I invite you to check out our documentation. We also have tutorials and sample apps. They are open source. And get in touch. I'll be here all day, and we can help you with your app. As a reminder, we're hiring. If you are excited about the future of Parse, come talk to me. And thank you for coming, and I believe I have some time for questions. We'll have people with mics in the audience, so just raise your hand if you have any questions. Can we get a mic here? Over here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello? Oh.
Yep.
So I saw in the Parse app that I downloaded today that if you're in the table view, you can drill down into the details. And I was wondering, based on what you showed today with the PF table, if that's going to be out of the box. For instance, you can drill down to different areas of the relational database or the data that you have in the cloud.
So, well, it is a UI Tableview Controller, so you will get the same delegate methods. If you're using code, you will get did select row. Okay. And actually, there is an additional method that will tell you this is the object that was selected. If you're using storyboards, then you can then, in the prepare for segue, get that object. But you still have to present the child or the next view controller.
So it's an actual subclass of the actual...
Yeah, it is a UI Tableview Controller subclass, so it works the same way. What it does is that it makes it easy to just give it a PFQuery, and it just displays that data. You don't need to set up the data source and delegates.
Oh, great. Thanks.
No more questions? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Or there's one here.
So one of the apps that I'm working on for a client, for instance, I've set up a relational database, and they've got kind of a front end to do all that. And I was wondering, I'd like to kind of move it over to Parse, just seeing what it can do with the relations. But is there a way that a front end that handles that the client can have versus someone actually going in there and seeing those tables, like something where we can say, okay, you can add this data to these fields, et cetera?
Well, we have a CSV and JSON importer where we will detect the schema you're importing and ask you to confirm if that's correct, but that's about it.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
or?
so I guess I could tell them, okay, fill out this Excel doc, and then they can shoot it up.
Yes, I believe, yeah, you can just give us an Excel. As long as it's properly formatted, it should work.
Sure.
Yeah.
For example, I'm writing a chat application, and the people are joining in the chat.
Can you get closer to him, Mike?
Yeah, so I'm writing a chat application where the users are writing in the chat groups. So, so if I create a group, for example, I have a table, so multiple users wants to write on it. So it's a dynamic table. So how that table is like sent across the different users. For example, I wanted to, there's a common table.
Right.
I want to create dynamically at the time, and then all the users are writing into that.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
For example, so if there is a large number of users, if I want to search for a user, do I need to just go through a single table, or do I need to, like I have a friends that are in, I need to create a table.
So are you asking if I have so many objects with a very long list?
Yeah.
Well, if you're using PFQuery Tableview Controller, you get pagination for free.
No, if I'm doing a query on the table.
If you're already on the table?
Yeah, so if I'm, for example, there are a lot of users that are signed up on the Facebook. There are a lot of users. So in that, there are like only 10 or 20 are my friends. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
So for all the users, they're going to be in the single table, or they could be, can I create my own table of users?
You can create your own table of users, but then it's up to you to manage those user accounts. There is, when you use PF user, it has its own table for all the users.
Okay.
And for most situations, just one table should be enough. Do you want to create segments of users that are related?
That are like my friends, I want to be in my table.
Well, in that case, you will probably don't want to separate them into different tables. You just use one table and for users, which is already provided, and then you set the relationship in a separate class. That's where you create that entity that unites those users. For example, if it's a chat application, you would have a chat group or something like that, that then has references to all those users.
Okay.
But it's still one table. Thank you. Oh, there's one question over here.
Does that table have lazy loading built in?
You mean the PFQuery Tableview Controller? In what aspect do you mean? Oh, yes. Yes. When you set up that image key, that's going to use PF image view. It is a class that we provide. You can use it directly if you wish, but you get it for free with PFQuery Tableview Controller. You just tell it, this is the name of the column where my images are stored. And yes, as you scroll, it will make sure it loads the images. You don't need to worry about making sure you're loading the right image for this row, which is a common problem that people might run into where their network thread comes back, but they don't have the cell on screen anymore. You get that. Okay.
Hi. So if I use PF user and I allow login via Facebook, Twitter, and as well as the username password, is there a way of sort of user disambiguation, because the same user has a Twitter account and a Facebook account, and maybe they signed in once with Facebook and once with Twitter? Like, do you use your sort of, I don't know, internal database to disambiguate them as the same user in some way, or is that something that I'll have to figure out on my own and like?
Yes. So, the way that we set up Parse is that it should work for almost everybody, and we don't make some assumptions about how your users will be set up. So if someone, let's say they sign up with a username, password, and email, and then they come back and log in with Facebook, and they have the same email, we don't assume it's the same user, because, I mean, we could make that assumption, but we're not going to do that for you. What you might want to do is, since we provide before save hooks in Cloud Code, you do that for user, and when they sign up, you check, is there already a user with this email in my database? If you find it, and if you can check that they have verified that email, you might be pretty sure it's the same user, and then maybe display a message saying, hey, you actually are already signed up with username and password, and avoid creating a second class. We're here.
Hi. How would you
Where are
compare
you?
the new?
Oh,
back
yeah.
here, yeah. How would you compare the new Parse Analytics to Flurry?
Sorry, can you speak up? Sorry.
Sure. How would you compare the new Parse Analytics to Flurry?
How will I compare it? Let's see. Well, Query has been around for a long time, and it's something that many developers have been using. I think that the analytics we launched today are pretty similar in functionality. The thing is that you get these analytics for free when you use Parse. If you were to use a third-party service for analytics, you will need to probably use Cloud Code to make HTTP requests every time your user makes a new action. And that's going to consume not only Parse API requests, it's going to consume that service's API request. So it's pretty similar, but you just get this functionality for free.
Hello, I would like to know what kind of relation does it exist between users and devices for push notifications?
Okay, great questions. So when you use push notifications in Parse, like I said earlier, there is a special table for users. Now, for push notifications, there is a separate special table that's used for push notifications, and it's called installations. Every time one of your users installs your app on Android, iPhone, Windows, it gets its own installation object. So we're not tracking the specific device. We're actually tracking a specific installation of your app. You can still use, each different platform has its own way of tracking specific devices. So you can still get that data and maybe associate to a specific device. But the way we see it is you have a specific installation of your app. And that, since this is a parse table, that's what you use when you use a query to push to all these users or these installations. And that's actually something that we will be covering in the talk right after this one.
Okay, thank you, Hector.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Okay, so our next speaker will be coming up in around 10 to 15 minutes. And thank you for coming, and feel free to grab me if you have any other questions.